My brother-in-law, Mark, wasn't exactly what you'd call a model student. He was the kind of kid who always seemed to be somewhere else, even when he was physically present. Teachers would call on him and he'd snap back to reality, but you could tell his mind was wandering far beyond the classroom walls. He never quite fit in with the whole school thing. While other kids were busy joining clubs and sports teams, Mark was often found alone, lost in his own thoughts. He didn't care much for the social scene or the academic grind, didn't see the point of memorizing facts he'd forget in a week. He'd often say, "What's the use of cramming all this stuff into my head if I'm just going to forget it after the test?" His notebooks were a mess, filled with doodles and half-finished assignments. He was a dreamer, always tinkering, always building. Give him a broken gadget and he'd take it apart and put it back together, often making it better than before. His room was a workshop, cluttered with tools and half-finished projects. School just felt like a cage for his free spirit. The rigid schedules, the endless rules, it all seemed to stifle his creativity. He'd sit in class, fidgeting, staring out the window, dreaming of what he could be doing instead. So it wasn't a huge surprise when he dropped out junior year. He walked out of those school doors with a sense of relief, like a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. He was finally free to pursue his own path, whatever that might be. My wife Sarah was devastated. She had always hoped Mark would find his way within the traditional system, that he'd buckle down and make it work. Seeing him walk away from it all broke her heart. Our parents, well, let's just say they weren't thrilled. They had always envisioned a more conventional future for him: college, a stable job, a predictable life. To them, dropping out was like throwing all those dreams away. They saw it as throwing his future away. There were heated arguments, long discussions that went nowhere. They couldn't understand why he would give up on something so important. Mark, though, he just shrugged it off. He had this carefree attitude, like none of it really mattered. He'd say, "I'll figure it out. I always do." And in a way, you had to admire his confidence. He had a plan, he said. He always did. He'd spend hours scribbling in notebooks, drawing up blueprints for inventions, writing down business ideas. He was always thinking, always planning. Problem was, those plans never quite panned out. He'd get excited about a new idea, dive into it headfirst, but something would always go wrong. Either the funding would fall through, or the market wasn't ready, or he'd lose interest and move on to the next big thing. At least, not at first. He was persistent, though. Every failure was just a stepping stone, a lesson learned. He'd pick himself up, dust himself off, and start again. He bounced from job to job, each one a dead end. Mechanic, construction worker, even tried selling insurance for a hot minute. Nothing stuck. He was always searching for something that would ignite his passion. Even tried selling insurance for a hot minute. Nothing stuck. He was always searching for something that would ignite his passion. Each job felt like a temporary stop, a place to catch his breath before moving on. The disappointment in everyone's eyes, it was getting heavier by the day. You could see it in the way they looked at him, the way they talked to him. It was like they were waiting for him to finally give up, to admit that he had made a mistake. But Mark, he never did. He kept pushing forward, kept dreaming, kept believing that one day he'd find his place in the world. And maybe, just maybe, he would. The years after dropping out were rough on Mark. He had always been a dreamer, someone who believed in the power of ideas and innovation. But reality hit hard when he left college without a degree. The world outside was unforgiving, and he found himself lost in a sea of uncertainty. He moved from one dead-end job to another, each one chipping away at his confidence. The monotony of these jobs was soul-crushing, and he often wondered if he would ever find his true calling. The days blurred into weeks, and the weeks into months, each one more disheartening than the last. He felt like a failure, like he'd let everyone down, especially Sarah. She had always been his biggest supporter, the one who saw potential in him even when he couldn't see it himself. But now, he felt like he was dragging her down with him. They were dating back then, and she believed in him so much. Her unwavering faith in him was both a comfort and a burden. He wanted to live up to her expectations, to be the person she believed he could be. But the weight of his own self-doubt was overwhelming. It killed him to see the worry in her eyes. Every time she looked at him with concern, it was a reminder of his own shortcomings, He wanted to reassure her, to tell her that everything would be okay, but he couldn't find the words. He started with drawing, spending hours alone in his workshop, tinkering with scraps of metal and electronics. It was his sanctuary, a place where he could lose himself in the process of creation. The hum of machinery and the smell of soldering metal became his solace. It was his escape, the one place where he didn't feel like a complete screw-up. In the workshop, he was free to experiment, to fail and try again without judgment. It was a small glimmer of hope in an otherwise bleak existence. He built things, took them apart, rebuilt them. Each project was a puzzle, a challenge that kept his mind occupied. He found a strange comfort in the repetitive motions, in the trial and error of his work. He was searching for something, though he wasn't sure what. Perhaps it was a sense of purpose, or maybe it was a way to prove to himself that he wasn't a failure. Whatever it was, he was determined to find it, even if it meant countless hours of frustration and dead ends. One day, Sarah found him in his workshop, surrounded by a chaotic mess of wires and circuits. She had been worried about him, about the toll this endless search was taking on his mental health. But she also knew that this was where he felt most alive. She was worried, but Mark just looked up at her with a spark in his eyes that she hadn't seen in years. It was a glimmer of the old Mark, the one who was full of ideas and dreams. For the first time in a long while, he felt a surge of hope. "I think I got it," he said, a slow grin spreading across his face. It was a moment of clarity, a breakthrough that had eluded him for so long. The pieces of the puzzle were finally coming together. "I think I finally figured it out." His voice was filled with a newfound confidence, a sense of purpose that had been missing for years. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one where he could finally see a path forward. What Mark had figured out was a new type of energy-efficient engine. He'd been toying with the idea for years, ever since his days as a mechanic. He knew the current engines were clunky, wasteful. He was sure there was a better way. And after countless failed prototypes, countless nights sleeping in his workshop, he'd finally cracked it. He poured every ounce of his energy, every penny he had, into building a prototype. Sarah, bless her heart, never doubted him for a second. She even took on extra shifts at the hospital to support his dream. They were a team, facing down the world together. He started small, showing his engine to local mechanics, engineers, anyone who'd listen. At first, there was skepticism. A dropout inventing a revolutionary engine? Yeah, right. But then they saw it in action. They saw the numbers. And slowly, doubt turned into curiosity, then amazement. Section 4. Facing the Dragons. Word about Mark's engine spread like wildfire. It wasn't just a whisper in the corridors of tech enthusiasts. It was a roar that echoed through the halls of innovation. Social media buzzed with excitement, and forums were ablaze with discussions about the potential of his groundbreaking invention. Soon, he wasn't dealing with skeptical mechanics, but with sharp-suited investors, the kind of people who could make or break dreams with a single signature. These were individuals who had seen countless pitches and heard endless promises, yet something about Mark's vision caught their attention. These were guys with more money than they knew what to do with. They were used to luxury, to making decisions that moved markets. But now, they were intrigued by a simple man with a revolutionary idea. This was a whole new world for Mark, a world far removed from the grease and grime of his workshop. The polished floors and glass walls of corporate offices were a stark contrast to the familiar clutter of his garage. It was a world of boardrooms and presentations, of contracts and negotiations. Mark had to learn the language of business, to navigate the intricate dance of deals and partnerships. Every meeting was a test, every presentation a performance. It was intimidating, terrifying even, but he pushed through. The stakes were high, and the pressure was immense, but Mark's determination was unwavering. He knew that every challenge he faced was a step closer to realizing his dream. He knew his invention had the potential to change the world, to revolutionize the way we think about energy. It wasn't just about creating a new engine, it was about paving the way for a sustainable future. to make a real difference, to leave a lasting impact. Mark's vision extended beyond the immediate benefits of his invention. He saw a future where technology and nature coexisted harmoniously, where innovation served the greater good. He wasn't just doing this for himself, for Sarah. His family was his anchor, his source of strength. Every late night, every moment of doubt, he thought of them. They were his motivation, his reason to keep pushing forward. He was doing it for a future where energy wasn't something to be fought over, but something that could lift everyone up. A future where clean, renewable energy was accessible to all, where the planet thrived alongside its inhabitants, but something that could lift everyone up. Mark envisioned a world where solar panels and wind turbines were as common as streetlights, where every home and business contributed to a sustainable ecosystem. The investors, they saw the dollar signs, of course. They analyzed the financial charts, discussed the potential returns. But there was more to their interest than just profit margins. But beneath that, Mark could sense something else, a grudging respect. They recognized the passion, the fire in his eyes. They saw a man who believed in his vision with every fiber of his being. The fire in his eyes. They saw a man who was willing to fight for his dream, who wouldn't back down in the face of adversity. Mark's determination was palpable, and it resonated with them. They saw a man possessed by an idea, driven by a purpose greater than himself. His passion was infectious, his vision compelling. It was clear that Mark wasn't just another inventor, he was a visionary, and they knew better than to bet against that. They saw the potential for greatness, the possibility of being part of something transformative. Mark's journey was just beginning, and they wanted to be a part of it. Section 5. Building an empire. With the investors on board, things moved fast. Mark's small workshop transformed into a bustling factory. He wasn't alone anymore. He had a team of engineers, designers, all working towards a common goal. It was overwhelming at times, but exhilarating. He never forgot where he came from, though. He made sure his employees were treated right, paid fairly. He remembered what it felt like to struggle, to feel invisible. He wasn't going to let that happen to anyone on his watch. His engine, it was more than just a machine. It was a symbol of hope, of what could be achieved with hard work and a refusal to give up. He was proving all the doubters wrong, all the people who thought a dropout couldn't change the world. He was rewriting the rules, showing them that success could be found in the most unexpected places.